start with the path that led to the h.wood group. Because what I see when I look at it is, we all kind of fell into the same industry, but it seems to me like, based on looking at the trajectory from the very early days, from what I would argue is an insider's perspective, there were things that you guys figured out, and let's call it like the early to mid 2000s, that other people are just catching on to today. What do you think those things are?
Like things that made us successful.
Yeah, like in your path to h.wood group, what do you think of the things that you understood about the industry, that made you successful?
I think we might have different answers. I think for me, I think John and I growing up in LA and really like knowing the city and knowing the customers and living and breathing really the city itself and knowing the places that had succeeded prior and what made them work and knowing sort of what our crowd wanted were the secrets to our early success. I think the first, we had both thrown parties all over town at different venues. I had promoted at different places. We'd done corporate events at different places. And so I think we sort of had the inside knowledge on what worked and what didn't. And we were extremely hands-on. We were there every night for years and years and years that our venues were opened to make sure that our customers got the best experience, made sure that the service was great, made sure that they were taken care of. And so I think having that sort of like inside knowledge was really beneficial, and molding and creating the venue into something that we knew that our like small network of people would like. And then we knew that if the right people were happy and were there and made it their home, then everyone else would follow.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. I would say there's two key things that I think we did early on. We did a lot of things wrong and not smart, but I think two things that we did specifically to answer your question, if you look back on it, whether it was inherent or intentional or whatever, it was what we did, was one thing I'll never forget. When we both were versions of promoters. We started at the promotion event thing way back in the day. So back then, I'll never forget, like the main owners, like of the time of the era, I would always, I have a love of detail for aesthetic, personally, for art. And I think whether people know that or not, they do as well, meaning guests and customers. They may not be. So I'll never forget, there was a new place opening I was a promoter of, and I was like, you're leaving the floors concrete, just straight cement. I was like, well, are you going to finish it? He's like, absolutely not. That's a waste of money. No one looks at the floors. Furthermore, if you see the floors, it means you're not full and it's a bad sign. And that, to this day, it was probably 25 years ago, right? Like to this day, that so sticks longer actually. But that sticks with me because when Brian and I, we actually set out to do the opposite, in the sense of we err on the fact that a guest notices everything, every little thing. And so a statement like no one looks at the floor or, any version of that was a thing. And so for LA, it was novel, especially for the nightclub world, which we started in, and the bars, to pay serious attention to detail. And I guess a broader answer to that was assume the guest is, they're interested, like they want to feel elevated. Don't assume the opposite. And so I think we did that really smart. The second thing I think we did, if you're talking about that era, what we did different was I think we were one of the first, especially in LA, to do the inverse of whatever. We were protecting guests, not only celebrities, just guests. We were saying, this is your home. And at the time when we were, I guess, if you will, the early part of whatever version of Rising, like when we were starting out, it was like the start of like paparazzi and the start of like paying appearance fees and like stuff like that. We truly did the opposite. And so we played the long game. Now, people were making a lot more money than us a lot faster, I have to say, but we're one of the only ones still going. The rest of them are.
Who else is left, John?
So yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's something, it's always easy. I'm the type to always focus on what our failures are or were and what, but I do like to remember and notice things that we've done right. And so I think that's a good point in that regard,
I do. It's just I think generationally, because I think we're all the same age. It was a really interesting time to come up in nightlife. I think it was also a really interesting time to be in the restaurant industry. When you look at kind of the title shifts in Los Angeles at the time, where I would argue in 2000, definitely not a culinary destination, and today it is, that it was rooted in nightlife. Also, the interesting thing is we are aging out. I owned a dive bar on Hollywood Boulevard for, a dozen years. And by the time I sold it, I mean, I didn't look anything like the people that went there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I've noticed about your brands over time is they seem to be maturing at the same rate that you are. They're actually a reflection of self, which is hard to do. Look, my transition from nightlife into dining, especially like full service fine dining, was probably the hardest leap I made as a business owner. What was that like for you guys, going from nightlife into the game of high expectations?
I can go first, Brian, if you want. Very important to notice, it's by far the hardest thing. But I will say, I think it was and is more natural. I don't want to speak for Brian, but I do think for both of us, what age or not, it was also more of our, like, we both in our group with us too. Like, we have some great people with us too. But Brian and I both have always been in this for the love of the business. We're not in this for the other reasons, drinking, being popular, drugs, any of that. Never done any of that. Both of us always had a girlfriend, wives, like our one wife. We were in this to build a great business, which is, I think, super important in that regard, because so many don't. So point of my story is that a restaurant lends itself so much more to that, because you can have a real home for people to be at. And the way we build ours, knock on wood, these people are at our restaurants 3-4 nights a week, not once every 3 months. And so that's really what we looked at, is we said, we're going to take our skill set, which most don't have, our skill set for being able to fill a room, a nightlife room, right? Little more fun than the boring bright light restaurant. We're going to take that skill set and apply it to a restaurant, culinary. And we had a lot of bumps in the road, figuring out chef, operations, all of that. We can definitely go into that if you want. It is very hard, but I do think it's more natural for us, and was. And you could see, because we loved it, lived and breathed it. Our friends loved it. And as we, as more people get not just older, but it became more of like a thing, all ages, But you're right. As we, we keep adapting, we recognize when we're not the young guys, we look at people that are young, that are tastemaker. We're very smart about that. I mean, next up, we're going to be opening old age homes. So, but no, I think that's what our key. I do think we adapt with our crowd, our age, the times. Like, there's a bunch of things we like to notice and see what's needed.
Yeah, I think it's funny going from. I think we had probably 4 or 5 nightclubs before we decided that we needed a restaurant. Yeah, John's right. We felt like we had grown out of the nightclubs, and our friends had grown out, and we really felt like our secret sauce was our network and our core group of people. And so raising money for the first restaurant was actually a massive challenge. We had all this success in nightclubs. So you would have thought, and we had people saying, we'll put money into your next club. But as soon as we said we want food, it was scary to people. They said, well, you're nightclub guys. That's a whole different ballgame. Restaurants are much harder. You guys don't know what you're doing. And candidly, we had no track record. John and I don't know how to cook, at all. So people weren't going to be coming for our food, but we said, look, at the end of the day, it's all about the look and the feel and the vibe and the thing you create. And whether that's food or a bar or a hotel, which we hope to do one day, it's kind of all the same thing. And so we stuck to our guns, and we were able to sell part of the company to Hakkasan Group, and they paid for part of the Nice Guy. So we were able to get it done. And I think John's totally right. It actually ended up being more successful than the clubs were, because it was more natural for us. We could sit there, we could bring the right people, we could host those guests. They were happier to be there than at a nightclub. At the end there, it felt like they were doing us a favor to be at the nightclub, right? But at the
Right.
restaurant, we wanted to be there. We were doing them a favor to get them a reservation, and so sort of turned the tables a little bit on that.
Do you know
And
why
so
it's called the nice guy, Josh?
No, I don't.
To Brian's point, we were building it, and everyone only wanted us to do nightclubs. The investor we had thought we were doing a nightclub, but when he found out we were building a restaurant, he flipped out, pulled his money out, and he was like, "You guys are too nice of guys. You're going to lose everything." So we named it the nice guy. Found other
Oh,
investors.
that's hilarious. Let's talk about losing everything. It's, you see it in nightclubs. Like, you see it a lot in nightlife, especially like during the era we were in it, that you've got these nightclubs with 1,000 people in it and there's like no money in the bank, right? They're generating 20, 30, 40, $50,000 in a night, and how somehow miraculously there's just no money for probably a variety of reasons. But let's assume a lot of them were honest operational issues. The margins in fine dining, in full service, are much worse than in the nightclub industry. So talk to me about the business of restaurants. How did you figure out how to make money in the restaurant industry, considering the fact that like people spend their lives in the restaurant industry and don't figure it out, right?
I think, the margins aren't necessarily that much worse in restaurants from nightclubs. By the time you factor in the amount you have to pay promoters at the clubs, and then you have to pay these DJs or the performer, it's almost the same thing. So that you don't have the food to worry about, but you have all these other costs that you don't have at a restaurant. And so there is that to think about. But in terms of figuring it out, I don't know. I think we ran the nice guy and then Delilah and everything from it sort of the way that we wanted to do these things. And so we didn't run it like a typical restaurant. Most restaurants, they go wide open on Open Table and all these websites. They're just happy to get customers. And then we did the opposite. We made it very hard to get a reservation. You kind of had to know us. So we treated it like a nightclub in that regard. And we had people begging to buy bottles or pay for a table to get in. And we said, no, it's not that kind of place. And so I think running it that way led to the longevity that we have. I mean, we've been open 11 years now at the Nice Guy, and it's still busy, as busy as it was day one.
Is it the same people, Brian? Or is it different people? And if it's
some of the
different
same-
people, how did they find out?
I think it's some of the same people. I think it's definitely some new people. Look, over 11 years, we are now on some of these websites, and
Sure.
you just have to be. But for the first few years, it was very hard to get a reservation and get in. So I think we were able to create the demand, so that when people were in there, they spent a lot of money. They were buying nice wine. They were spending on food. And we really filled it ourselves. And so the margins were fantastic at the Nice Guy. And then when it came time to Delilah, there was some adjusting. We were spending too much on the dancers, spending too much on the band. We had to really change what Delilah was. And once we made it more of a restaurant, actually the margins improved greatly. And the margins, knock on wood, still, it's been 10 years at Delilah LA now. Still successful, still making money now to this day. So I think we sort of like, by doing it our way and not doing like the traditional restaurant route, I think creating that demand led to some better numbers.
I think a couple things, because the margins are hard. They are very hard. You have to live and breathe your restaurants. If you're and we're talking about fine dining. We're not talking about fast food, fast casual. It's a very different business. What we do, I think, no matter how big you are or small, if you're not living and breathing personally as the owner, as the founder owners, if you're not living and breathing them truly in the venue, often, meaning multiple times a week, not I don't see anyone being able to succeed, because the reason it's a hard business, there's so many moving parts to it, with labor, with food costs, with theft, of course. But at the end of the day, it's more about the not having your eye on it and what's going on, and that is why it's tough, and so I think that's been the key to what we've done, is we've lived and breathed it. I mean, Brian and I, and then we have other partners, Tony and Adam and Jacob, and we have these guys that are all like living and breathing it with us. We have We have a head of operations, a GM of each place, an assistant GM. And I mean, there's a ton that we've put in protocol wise. So that infrastructure is key.
Let's talk about that because as you grow these organizations, a couple of things happens. As I went from one tier of dining to the next, because obviously I was a masochist, you have to start with first principles because nothing translates, right? I would argue that, outside of hospitality, very little translated from nightlife into fine dining, at least for me, in terms of steps of service and all of that. And so I was always starting over. And so my leadership team had to evolve with me. And so I would assume over the last 2 decades, you guys have gone through different phases of nurturing and growing talent in-house and then acquiring talent as well, right? When do you decide which to do?
I think at first we didn't have a choice. I mean, we could barely do anything. We had trouble raising money. There was no way we were going to attract like top talent, right? We were unproven restaurateurs. Over time, as we've molded these places and grown them and had commercial success to where people see the press, we're now a company that people desire to work at, right? We get a lot of inbound requests from great people that have worked at really great companies that really want to join the h.wood group. They've either eaten at a restaurant, they've seen the press on a restaurant, they've talked to friends who work for us, or something one way or another. We've been able to attract really great talent over the last half of the journey here. The first half was a lot harder, and we really had to do it ourselves and bootstrap it. And like I said, we had to be in there every night ourselves, acting as if we were a GM of the venue. And you're right. First you nurture it, and now we're able to sort of get the best of the best.
Was there a time when, I know for me and my company, that it was time to level up. It was time to acquire talent that exceeded my own abilities, somebody that I could potentially learn from. And in that moment, at least for me and my career and my business, couldn't really afford that person. I was taking a chance on that person to hopefully take us to the next level. Was there a similar experience for you guys?
Yeah, I think in every department. I mean, we were like doing our own HR for a while there until you realize like, man, we're getting sued a lot. We need like real HR.
Yeah.
So I think, at first it's almost like a startup in a tech company. I was saying it's almost like a startup in a tech company where everyone has to do everything. John and I were the manager, the HR, the promoters, everything under the sun. So it started like that. But I think when we had the nice guy, we were able to sort of like just will it and make it happen with just like a manager. I think when we opened Delilah, it was a lot. And we had really great nightlife people from the nightclubs, and we tried to have them learn the restaurants with us. And it just was not working. The first, 6 or 9 months of Delilah, I don't think it made a penny. It lost money every month. And we were so busy. And we couldn't wrap our head around it. And we brought in actually Jacob, who's still with us all these years later. And we brought him in. He worked at Michael Mina prior and SBE. And we said, like, what are we doing wrong? And he came in there and said, well, you can't have a 6-piece band on a Tuesday when you're not, you can't do this and you can't do that. And really put our food cost in line, and we cut the menu way down, changed the hours, changed so many things, changed the number of servers on the floor to where the service stations were, things that we didn't even think about, contemplate, know about, anything like that. And so I think it was really with that Delilah when we hit the moment where you're right, we needed to get the right talent and spend more. And now all these years later, after seeing the way that like our partners at the Wind operate in Vegas and taking some lessons from them and seeing what works there, and now we've learned a lot over the years. But yeah, that to me was the moment, John.
You bring up an interesting point that I think you see a lot, which is the difference between making more work and making more money. I think on the front end, they look the same. There's this Mexican restaurant around the corner from my house, and they just put up like 2 big banners. One of them says now open at 8 a.m. on the weekends for brunch. And the second one says now offering like $1.29 tacos for Taco Tuesday. And I'm really going to miss them when they go out of business, because like these are the last, right? Because you see it, right? Like they're making more work. They're not making more money.
Yeah.
Right. They are obviously struggling. And so what they are doing is they are expanding hours of operation, which is going to create more overhead where there's no demand. And they're going to reduce their profitability by reducing their price points.
Yeah.
And so I think about your business kind of through two lenses. Number one, like through expansion, right? You go to your website and it's like, oh, these guys have, like several places. And then it's like, what's coming up next? And it's like, holy shit, these guys are building out like a dozen places simultaneously. How do you determine what is more work and what will ultimately end up being more money? How do you evaluate opportunities at this stage?
So it's a lot of, the largest discussion we have is
For sure, because you're successful. So people present you with opportunities all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, with the growth. I mean, I can just tell you, look, there's no crystal ball. There's actually no science. We've now been involved with the biggest operations of all time, and nobody has an actual scientific reason in this business in a lot of ways. There's a million parameters of like studies and foot traffic and all this stuff. But at the very end of the day, you have to go by what your company mantra is, if you will. So what we've done is we really try to stick to what our mission statement, if you will, our goal of h.wood is, and that we really, we've been doing the whole time, but I'd say in the last 5 years, we actually made it a real mission statement and a mantra and a goal, and actually dropped some, closed or sold some venues that didn't fit it within the bucket. We try to stay super disciplined. And so that really is this luxury restaurant / lifestyle is what we're staying in, and it's our focus. So anything that kind of feels outside of it when it comes to affecting the brand with the demo, or whatever it might be, that's our number one thing. So I'd say that's first and foremost. I'd say second, as far as locations, it really has to do, at least for now, in the time being, of where we are effective, where our crowd is going, like our core customers and guests, if you will. And then from there, it comes down to the deals that we're getting. So a place is, in a lot of ways, you win or lose before you open the doors with the type of deal you're getting, with the landlord, with the location, with how you're building it out. And so, we look at all of those parameters, and then we always try to factor in like, hey, what's missing from a area? Like, we were going to open a Italian, our nice guy concept in a spot. And we noticed there were 12 other Italian restaurants within blocks. Like, that's a lot. And so we pivoted to a different concept. It's stuff like that you do. I don't know. You have any other takes on that, Brian?
No, I think we have a plan of cities we're looking to go to with Delilah at this point. And so, look, you never know what's going to be successful, but we feel like Delilah needs a big city. We're opening in Dallas. We're opening in New York. We're opening in the UAE. Like, I don't think a Delilah would work in, can't even think of a city, San Francisco, for example. It needs to be a city that people really like to go out. There are clubs. There's like that excess, right? And so we're really picky about cities we choose, and then we're really picky about the location we actually pick, because being 6 blocks the wrong direction can sometimes make a restaurant that would have been successful not work. And we've had too many misses in LA on not being picky enough, because I think when we were younger, we were just happy to have a deal. And so we may have done some places that in hindsight didn't really make sense. I mean, we had a karaoke bar called Blind Dragon that was hidden behind Bootsy Bellows that we were like, oh, this is great. No one will see it. It's hidden like that. Well, in hindsight, like, it would have worked much better had it been on a street where people actually knew it was there. And, I think as you get older and make those mistakes, you can set a clearer path for the future. And so I would say we're a lot pickier now, but we really study the cities, the part of the city, the building, the lease, to all of it. It all fits together. And what concept too.
Can we talk about being cool for a minute? So it's, do you guys have kids, by the way?
Both
Yep.
of us.
So, I spend most of my time trying to convince my 7-year-old daughter that at one stage I was very cool, like very, very cool. Like people wanted to be my friend. She finds it impossible to believe. Um, but I look at what you guys are doing. I think Mark with Catch is another great example in the way that you have been able to like productize and consistently replicate cool in a multi-generational way that because like you look at your venues and you see not judgment because I'm almost there myself, like you see 50-year-olds hanging out and you see 25-year-olds hanging out and everything in between, and I think it is very difficult to be universally cool. So what do you think it's that you figured out or that you've tapped into that is of, I would argue, universal perceived value in this area of, like you talked about, like luxury and affluence?
I think, look, my 2 cents on that is there's nothing more valuable than I'll call it a cool factor. I think there's an X factor with, I think, what you're saying. I don't necessarily think either of us care or think about actually being cool. I think I look at the cool factor of what you're doing in the places. So for that, what my big thing is always paying attention to, like, I think the biggest thing that we've done well in this regard, or if this what you're saying is, I think Brian and I we've never been the type to be like, we're going to always be the guy. Like we have to be the center of the party. It's actually the opposite. Like we're noticing what's going to work or what, like we tap into what's the right crowds to be there, what's the right musician that's coming up, or what's the right artist or fashion person or whoever it might be. And you'll see like a musician that a year and a half later is massive that was performing at our places, or a fashion person, same thing. I think that's something that we've been pretty good at in that regard, where it's like we're almost like the ultimate observers and have make our places safe havens for that. And then we're disciplined. We stay super long game. We're really big on that. You're gonna go through highs and lows. There's gonna be a lot of lows. You have to stay to your brand as hard as it is in a lot of ways, and you have to really stay disciplined on it. And I think that is where we're in that regard with what you're saying, kind of winning. And then, like I said, it's really just being about observing what we think in our gut is going to be next or the right move. And we do that with our events. We do that with, who we're hosting. I think that's what makes that cool factor. I mean, hopefully, but it's definitely a major aspect of what we do.
And I would say we saw early on with our nightclubs, Bootsy Bellows was the hottest place in town for a while.
For sure.
And then it just got to a point where people had been and people were over it, and people were over nightclubs and people were over the paparazzi getting their picture. And as the crowd grew older, they wanted restaurants. And we saw that nightclubs have a shelf life, and nightclubs really are for like younger people. But in order to have longevity, you have to appeal to the 50-year-olds. And I think the cool 20 and 30-year-olds want to go to a place that's also cool for the 50-year-old. Like you look at like the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel,
Of course.
the Tower Bar, like the crowd is predominantly older, but the young kids who are in there are like very cool, right? Whereas you can't build something for a 20-year-old and think that like the 40 and 50 and 60-year-olds are going to want to go. The nightclubs are just too loud. And they just don't work. And so I think we built the restaurants with that in mind. The music's never too loud at the Nice Guy or Delilah. The lighting, while dark, sets the mood, but it's bright enough that you can still talk and have a conversation. And I think it's all about the vibe, the music, the food that's on the menu. Like we really try to appeal to, I would say, the older crowd. It's worked really well at the Bird Streets Club for a members club as well, where like young kids are begging to come in because we have the right cooler, older people. And that older crowd is very hard to get. I think you really have to personally invite them and handhold and make sure they know that this is a place for them. And then I think everyone else follows. So I think we've done a really good job of, building places for the older crowd.
So no trends.
Yeah,
That's the biggest thing we try to stay away from. Yeah, and it's hard because sometimes you're doing a trend without knowing it, which I guess makes it a trend. But we do try to stay away from the trends, and we do try to stay. Big thing for us is just loyalty. Like we're big on the people that are with us, and some of them rise to become big in their fields, and that helps us. Some don't, and that's life, you know. But it's a big aspect of us.
and I think we've been like anti-trend, right? Where it was social media was getting so big and TMZ and taking pictures of people and putting it on Instagram that you went somewhere. And when we opened the Nice Guy in Delilah, we said, we don't want any of this. We want a timeless place. No photos are allowed here. And we've had a no photo policy, which people were like, this is crazy. No one's going to go. They all want to post their night out and show that they've been there. And we said, well, that's not the crowd that we want. We're trying to create something special and timeless and protective. I mean, we went to crazy lengths to not have celebrities be seen going in there, right? We created a tunnel. If you pull up to the back of the Nice Guy, we literally have a tunnel that it's like an accordion door. It extends from our back door. It can go all the way past the sidewalk to a car. So someone can open their car door, go in the accordion into the Nice Guy, and no one can ever see them go in. Like, we went to crazy lengths to go against the trend of everyone being seen everywhere, because we felt, to your point, creating something cool and timeless was more important than like getting a little bit of press in that moment.
Do you have an ICP? Like, do you have a customer in your mind that you're always serving? Or is it yourself? Are you always building for you?
I think John and I have always been like friends with so many different groups of people, but I think like our close network, I feel like we're building places for them. We've been lucky and grew up in LA and knew the right people, and we have our high school friends. John and I went to college together. We have our USC friends who we still talk to on like group chats daily, all together, to friends from when we first started working to newer. It's like that, but that core network of people you trust, where we even run concepts by, like, would you guys go to this kind of food in this location? Or like, we run ideas by these people.
Yeah.
I think we appeal to them, and they happen to be like the movers and shakers and tastemakers and trendsetters, to where like they know what's going on, and they know about this city as well as we do, and really the country. So I think when we talk to them and they say, yeah, New York would be great for Delilah, then we know we should move forward. So I feel like we're appealing to like that inner circle, if you will.
Yeah, we've always said we're going to build places for our friends and their friends and their friends. So it's like almost like building for a 6 degree of separation. And it's been great for us. It's for what we do. Like I said, every group, every restaurant, everyone's got to find their different vibe and groove. And that's what we've been successful. And I will tell you, when we've done things that have kind of deviated from that model, they haven't worked for us. So it's an interesting, lesson learned.
You know what's interesting listening to the two of you talk is there aren't a lot of I's and my's. There are a lot of we's and there are a lot of us's. You guys have been around a long time. I mean, I would argue the average LA marriage doesn't last as long as your partnership has lasted. You know what I mean? Like, for real. Also, like, I've been around as long as you have. So, I mean, especially coming out of Nightlife. I mean, I could think maybe JT and Sylvan, right? Are the only two guys that have worked together for anywhere near as long as you guys have worked together. Like, that is an incredibly long partnership, friendship, kind of a mixture of all of it in LA. And you guys, your relationship predates working together. And so I would ask, like, what's the secret sauce there? What are the ground rules that you think have created a fruitful relationship, personally and professionally?
I think we're very much, from my side at least, like yin and yang. That we have different things that we're good at and enjoy doing, which helps. I think if we both were the same kind of person and same brain, we'd be all over each other. But I think John is a lot more creative. John's designed all of our places. John all our branding, all the marketing, that's all John's side. I'm more of like I'd rather look at a spreadsheet and deal with the numbers and the running of like day-to-day business stuff than that. I'm much more of whatever the opposite of the creative side is. the number side. So I don't think we step on each other's toes that often for a lot of what we do all day, if that makes sense. And I think that's led to a lot of the success in the partnership.
Yeah, I think the complementary thing is really key. I really think the core like human side of it, like we have the like ethics, morals, same overall vision for the brand and the goals of everything. I think that's really important because we fight every day, about everything business wise. Like I think that actually helps. I think if anything was all one sided, like if I got my way on anything, it'd be on everything, it'd be terrible. Like I get that, you know what I mean? I think Brian probably recognizes that. I think that's what works, and I do feel that that's a key thing to what we definitely have that complementary yin and yang side. I think that's probably the closest thing to like a secret of success in that regard with what you're saying.
Which is funny. We didn't really
Go ahead.
know that starting off, right?
Yeah.
At the time, we just both knew a lot of people and loved hosting and loved getting people in a room and loved like the hospitality of it. But neither one of us had really run a real business or grown a company or understood how to have company values or the things that you have to do as you get bigger, right? It's just so happened, funny looking back, that like we just complemented each other very well.
Let's talk about difficult conversations, because there's no way that you get to where you are without, I think, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, with having really difficult conversations. When I look at my least successful partnerships over the years, the ultimate undoing was almost always resentment. It was never thievery or these like massive betrayals or that this person was just incredibly inept. It was just this accumulation of small resentments over time. How do you make sure that doesn't happen? Like, how do you guys communicate in a way that keeps the relationship honest?
I mean, to answer that, I think we've both been, whether we meant to or not, been good about expressing it because that's going to always happen. Like
Sure.
he'll say it. He'll be like, "This is pissing me off. Like this is an actual issue." I've done it too. If it builds up even for a month, it becomes an issue. It's a very key point that I think when it's built up over time, like years, that breaks you rather than just get it out,
How do you learn?
fix it.
It's again, it's just a very interesting time. I mean, look, I would argue that the engine that drove h.wood when it initially established, the reason that all the other nightclubs went out of business was probably the advent of social media, right? Because like the model is that it was the Us Weeklies of the world that were driving the traffic from Orange County into Hollywood to go to these nightclubs. There have just been so many disruptive things that have happened within this industry over the course of the last 20 years. That has just been a series of resets over time. And so things that were fundamentally true in 2005 were fundamentally untrue by, I think, 2015. Right. And then again in 2020. And then here we are in 2025. And not only have you guys been through it all consistently, but you've also grown consistently through that time. And so how do you learn? How do you better yourself to adjust to this constantly changing environment that we find ourselves in?
I think the best way to learn is to be hands-on about it and really A, study the trends, but B, like just get out there. We eat at all sorts of different restaurants in all sorts of different cities. We travel nonstop. And on those trips, I mean, there's times we've had 2, 3, 4 dinners in a night just to go and like check out what else is successful or good in those cities. When I remember when we were opening in Chicago, I don't think I had ever been to Chicago before we were opening. We must have gone to 6 restaurants in a night there to see what was working, what wasn't, the crowd, the this, the that. We travel to these cities all the time. And even in LA, as soon as something new opens, we make it a point to try and go there to see why it's working or why people are talking about it or what we can be doing better or different. And that comes to food or service or vessels or marketing or anything. I think we're we're not too high on our horse to think that like we know everything perfectly. I think you can learn from anyone, from a huge chain down to like a mom and pop little place. Like there's something new and different all the time when you go out.
Yeah, to touch on that, I think the biggest thing is say this in a super non-cliche way, because I hate when people say it, but in a genuine way, I think we're both in our group with us are humble. And I say that in a business way, like we're never too high. You have to always be learning. And like, I remember they'll remain nameless, but I remember back years ago meeting a pretty massive hospitality guy that he thought he was God. Like we own restaurants for a living. Like we're not carrying lives. We're entertaining people. And it's like the minute you think you're some, I don't know, rock star, some guy, I really think you lose touch of your what you're doing. And so for us, I think we're just constantly learning. And you know, while I'm super competitive and always want to be the best, I will say I'm super respectful and love and support other like operators that are doing well, because the more success, the better. I really believe that, especially with good other operators that we, you know, are friends with or becoming close friends with. And I just think it helps each other.
I don't know if they're successful people that are objectively successful, or if they're just successful habits that specific people do with consistency. I believe that the latter is more than likely true. And so what I'm always trying to do is steal tactics, tools, strategies, right? Because like whatever serves you well would probably serve me well too. And I'm sure that the reason you're as successful as you are is because you spend as much time looking backwards as you have looking forwards. And so I would ask you, what should we steal from you? What are the things that have served you best that we could internalize and use ourselves?
For me, I think for my 2 cents would be play the long game. I think so many people are so quick on a tit for tat. I personally don't view us in the restaurant business, in the drink business, the hospitality business. I think we're in the people business. I really do. I think everything else, it's a given you have to have good food. It's a given you have to have a nice place. It's a given you have to have happy, nice. It's honestly a given. You're not going to be rewarded for that. What we are in is the people business. And by the people business, it doesn't just mean like, oh, you're greeting them. It means you are in lives of people outside of those four walls, through thick and thin, through everything. And it is not a business transaction. And if you're in that business transaction, really, it is not going to work. You have to genuinely be in that people game. And I'm talking about for our business, for our industry. That would be, I think, my biggest 2 cents to take away from learning wise from us.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think you can't open a for restaurants and hospitality. I think a lot of people get into it for the wrong reason. They do it to be cool or to party or to, not to treat it as a real business. And I think those are like doomed to fail. To John's point, like we have lived and breathed these venues and these people for over 20 years now. We're in the venues constantly. We're checking in on people when they come in to dine. I make sure to text them the next day making sure you had a great time. We personally are still responding to every text and every email for reservations. We could easily pass people off, right? We have a pretty big team here. I could easily say, just from now on, when you want a reservation, click here or email this person. Like, we don't do any of that. I think John and I are still the biggest bookers in the entire company in our places. And we're, like you said earlier, Josh, much older than a lot of our crowd, but we're on a text chain to book reservations at the Wynn. It's John and I are booking more than a lot of the young kids who are like the customer development, VIP services guys. Like, I think that just comes naturally to checking on people and living and breathing these places and treating them like a business and not just a place to be cool or a place to party, or you're sort of in it, but you're not actually there for yourself. And I think that's most important.